and welcome to the ArtTech Conversation. My name is Muriel Siki, and I will be moderating this conversation. Also with us from the ArtTech team is our technical moderator, Marion Leombre, and Natalie Pichard, who is the director of the ArtTech Foundation. They would both help you participate in our discussion. If you want to ask questions, and it's very important that you participate, just click on public chat that you see down on your screen, and you will find the instructions on how to ask your questions. We are very international today with speakers from around the world to answer the question, what is cultural and creative entrepreneurship? So let me first introduce our panel. First, Ling GU, who is speaking to us from Shanghai. Hello, Ling. You are currently a Ying Curatorial Fellow, which is a full-time program providing platforms for young talents in China who want to develop their skills in contemporary art exhibitions. Before, you were head of communications at Design Society. You have a long working experience in culture, arts, communication, and management. Also with us from Boston is Brendan Ciecko. Hello, Brendan.
Hello.
You're an entrepreneur, designer, typographer. You are the founder and CEO of Cuseum, which you created in 2014 to help museums, public attractions, and nonprofits use the power of digital to engage their visitors. You have a long entrepreneurial career. You also created 10-Minute Media ad agency that specializes in digital media, and you are on the board of several prestigious museums. And finally, Carina Popovici, hello. You
Hi,
are
everyone.
speaking from Zurich. You are the managing partner of Art Recognition. You hold a PhD in theoretical particle physics, and you have worked as a quantitative risk specialist in the Swiss banking industry before founding Art Recognition, which is a Zurich-based art tech startup, a startup which uses artificial intelligence for detecting fakes and forgeries in the art world. So before we try and answer the main question of our conversation today, can you tell us each a bit more about the companies you created or you worked for? Let's start with you, Ling. As you said, you are currently in the Ying Curatorial Fellowship Program. Can you tell us a little bit more about it? And before you worked with for Design Society, and can you tell us about that company a little bit, please?
Yeah, sure. The fellowship just started this February. So it's a research-based project for 1.5 years to look at the institutional landscape in China and to think about, what are the new possibilities for curatorial practices in China. I was the founding director, I was the founding member, one of the founding members for Design Society, which is a cultural hub, co-founded by China Merchants Group, which is actually the oldest state-owned company in China, in partnership with the V&A, the Victoria and Albert Museum in London. So its mission was to create the very first design-themed museum in China. As you know, there are lots of contemporary art museums. I used to work for Radboud Museum, for example. They have established their reputation in contemporary art in China in the past 10 years. I worked also for I was head of digital arts to take care of digital platforms initiated for supporting digital artistic practices both in China and in the UK. But design was somehow not really included in that sphere as really a kind of artistic or integrated creative practice. It was more seen as an industry rather than pure creativity, and its aesthetic values is not assessed like art, not recognized like art in China. So it was very necessary in a way to establish a public museum, a culture hub like Design Society, to also support and boost the development of creative and design communities in China. So that was the mission, and it started. I started working there like in 2015, and it opened publicly in 2017. So it's been operating for nearly 4 years, and its activity limited to its space. It has its own creative shops. It has its own, let's say, exhibition product lines. It sounds a little bit weird, but in the recent years in China, the exhibition market has been boosting. And there is a kind of ticketing market for exhibitions, not only museum-oriented exhibitions, but also more kind of marketing or, let's say, commercial targeted exhibitions. They could be themed in cultural heritages, or new media arts, or any theme you could think of. But they are also operating as a kind of entertainment product, if you like. People can get a ticket and spend some time with their kids or with the families. So it's let's say, more market-driven for developing audiences for museums, for cultural content in China. So Design Society has been quite pioneering in that aspect. Yeah, I think that's all for now.
Okay, thank you. So Carina, you went from the banking world to the art world by creating art recognition. How did that come about?
Yeah, so thank you very much for the kind introduction, Muriel, and for the question. So indeed, like you have mentioned before, I'm actually a physicist. By my original education, from physics, I went to banking, and from banking to entrepreneurship. So indeed, a pretty non-linear career. So while being at the bank, to tell how that came about, so I've met an art historian, and she became a friend, and we had long conversations. During those conversations, basically, she started telling me, about the problem of the forgeries on the art market, that there are so many fakes, being bought and sold, and there are also some prominent cases, by famous forgers. I think many of you might have heard about Beltraki, who sold forgeries like for about 30 years or more. And so she really sparked my curiosity. And so one of the spontaneous questions was like, why there is no program, to uncover forgeries. And it turned out that it wasn't. So then I said, okay, so I'm going to do it myself. And that's literally how it started. When a new painting comes in by a client or an art lover, that painting would also be fed into the program, and then the software basically searches for similar features or for the same brush strokes, and so based on that comparison, it returns a probability for the authenticity of the new artwork, so whether it's by the same hand or not. So that's the principle of it, which is quite simple, really. The company exists since 2019, so about 3.5 years now we are on the market. I'd say we're quite successful. So we actually have many clients here in Switzerland, but also overseas, like the US mainly. We are serving private collectors, of course, but also some galleries, auction houses, some museums even. So really a very diverse client base. What I'd like to add at this point, because I think it's quite important. So art recognition does not want to replace art experts or to compete with them. On contrary, we want to supplement their work. We want to support them. We want to offer this service as an additional pillar, to other authentication or traditional authentication methods, like I like to call them, which are on the market. You have provenance research, you have chemical analysis of the pigments, and you have the experts, of course. So art recognition is just like adding to the objectivity of this. And we hope, of course, that we are also adding to the transparency, and to the fairness of the art market. So that's all for now.
Thank you. And we heard you. That was great. Thank you very much, Carina. So let's try and get to Brendan this time, and hopefully it will work, because I was asking you the question. You created Cuseum, so tell us more. What is the purpose of this company? Is it to get people back into museums?
Yeah, great question, and thank you so much for having and assembling this conversation today. So I started Cuseum back in 2014 after working with a number of museums and cultural organizations in the United States, and just very clearly seeing how painful, frustrating, and obsolete a lot of the tools were at their disposal, whether it be for engaging visitors, engaging members, engaging donors. In many ways, the museum and cultural sector had been historically underserved by technology. And also the museum sector and the arts and cultural sector was at this kind of shifting moment, this pivotal moment around adopting new technologies. And so my story, just kind of jumping back or rewinding a little, I started developing technology when I was about 11 and 12 years old. I started my first agency at 13, focused on designing and developing technologies that were very experiential for the music and entertainment industry. And before the age of 21, I was working with Katy Perry, Mick Jagger, and Lenny Kravitz, really bringing their bringing their albums, their tours, their singles to life using online media and social media during that moment. And my passions for art and culture really started to evolve throughout my teenage years and early 20s. And so when the opportunity came around to work in the museum and cultural sector on a couple of projects, I really leaped at the opportunity because I wanted to learn more. I was passionate about the mission and the mission statement and the purpose of museums and cultural institutions. But then, as I previously mentioned, was just unbelievably surprised by how the tools of today were not where they needed to be. And in many ways, were leaving museums and their visitors kind of in the past. And so started the company, raised a seed round, went through Techstars, and then was focused on bringing our products to market. And our first product was geared around enhancing the on-site experience so that it was as engaging, educational, and convenient for museum visitors, regardless of their education level, their preferences, and so on. We wanted to make it so in some regard, you had the best tour guide in the palm of your hands anytime you need them, speaks multiple languages. You can hold up your phone and learn more about the artworks, and providing a number of different avenues for visitors, and also doing such in a way that made sense from a cost perspective, from an adaptability perspective, and from a maintainability perspective. And that led us to our second solution, which was really focused on the member equation. Now, I want to point out that in the United States, most of our cultural organizations do not receive significant or majority state support, unlike over in Europe and other parts of the world where it's kind of like the reverse. So to make up for those gaps and to also provide considerable support, we have membership programs. So individuals, corporations, families can become a member of a museum and gain free admission and otherwise. And when we started to spend more time with our customers, we quickly saw how inefficient and expensive kind of the cost per member was in fulfilling some of those correspondence and materials in the traditional way. We actually had an opportunity to work with an MIT MBA at the time to help us do cost benefit analysis and a bunch of other fun things to really underscore the benefits that we could provide to the museum and cultural organizations by creating a digital membership platform. And that's really unlocked a lot of potentials in the sector. We're happy to say that we now serve upwards of 400 customers, ranging from SF MoMA to the White House to the Munch Museum over in Oslo, to the Seattle Art Museum, the Perez Art Museum, the MFA, the Art Institute of Chicago, the National Gallery of Art in DC, and really some of the largest and most prestigious organizations, but also some of the smallest organizations that most of us have never heard of. And that's something that I really believe is important, to build technology that can be scalable and adaptable to really solve the pain points faced by cultural organizations. So many ways in in kind of conclusion, you know, our vision and our purpose as a company is to, you know, use technology to solve pain points in the museum, art, and cultural sector. And it's been quite a journey, and it's also been really exciting to watch new companies pop up and emerge that kind of fall under this art tech or muse tech or cult tech area or realm or community that are using creative ways, you know, to solve problems, whether it be authenticating art using, you know, modern artificial intelligence, or using, you know, mobile technology to solve some age-old problems. It's a really exciting moment, and we're proud to be a part of it.
Thank you, Brendan. And we heard you loud and clear all the way through.
Awesome.
Yeah, let's maybe now try to answer the question, which is really the theme of our conversation today. What is cultural and entrepreneurship and creative, entrepreneurship? So Brandon, maybe let's stay with you because you talked about your career, which is totally amazing. So what is your definition?
Yeah, well, first off, I want to start by saying what is not my definition. And as I started to become more and more interested in creative entrepreneurship and cultural entrepreneurship, my understanding had really evolved. So here in Boston, here in Massachusetts, our state became the first state in the United States to appoint a director of creative economy. I must have been 18 or 19 years old at the time, and was invited to participate in one of the first panels on that, where we're just kind of throwing around, you know, what is the creative economy? And this was really at a time where everybody was drinking Richard Florida's Kool-Aid, if you're familiar with Richard Florida and his concepts on the creative economy, and how that has evolved. And so as I became personally really interested in cultural entrepreneurship, creative entrepreneurship, I did a little bit of personal, you know, nerdy research and found that there was an art historian named Paul DiMaggio, I think from maybe Rutgers in New Jersey, back in the 80s, that used the term or coined the phrase cultural entrepreneurship. And the way that he described cultural entrepreneurship was this moment in, coincidentally, Boston, where they were trying to carve out and create separate groups and categories around what is high culture and what is low culture. And so Boston, kind of the Boston Brahmins, as they're called, the elites, if you will, were trying to form kind of this new elitist culture, high culture, maybe to parallel what they were seeing over in London, what they were seeing over in Vienna, what they were seeing in Paris, and the great cultural city. I have to just say Zurich now, to you know, to ponder a little, but or pander a little, but great cultural city as well. But anyways, you know, this led to the establishment of the MFA, which is debatably one of the finest, greatest art museums in the country, if not the world, as well as Symphony Hall, which is famous for its acoustics. And I was like reading this definition the first time anybody had ever used the term cultural entrepreneurship, and it was like, no, like this isn't it. Like that's not what it is in this day and age, where it's not about the founding necessarily of these new elitist organizations. It's about the creation, the culmination of new ideas that either are inspired by culture and creativity, use some of the mindsets of culture and creativity or artistic, you know, ways of thinking, and or to serve the cultural industries. So whether you're building technology that is working within the art space, and that can be the commercial, you know, consumption or commercialization or the marketplace, or that can be the serving of the museum sector, the music industry, whether it be in the creation or the consumption. And so it's a really, you know, broad space, but at the heart of it, it's, you know, unleashing, you know, what makes being human so beautiful, you know, creativity, artistic creation, and what is ultimately culture, and taking part in that through enterprising ways and innovative ways. So when I look at, again, that definition in the 80s, and compare it to where we are today, I think it is just like remarkably broader it's more inclusive, it's also more organic, and it also breaks down barriers between, you know, the elite and kind of the common population. Anybody can participate in this cultural economy, and anyone can become a cultural entrepreneur if that's something that, you know, is deep down inside their heart, and, you know, an area that moves them.
But very interesting, Brendan. But Carina, you came from a totally different world, the banking industry, and then you went into a creative industry. You are now a creative entrepreneur. Is there a different mindset? Is there a different way of working, of doing business? Is it very different?
Indeed, Muriel. So this is it's really hugely different, and I'm happy, you know, to bring in like this perspective into the conversation, because that's I think a bit different than Brandon's experience from the past. So I mean, you know, the picture of the mouse in the wheel in the banking, on the corporate in general, it's not a legend. It really is the truth, you know. So for me, you know, like moving from banking, you know, to entrepreneurship was really like breathing in some fresh air, you know, like while being in a bank or in a corporate, you know, for that matter, you can't just take decision, you know, everything goes up and down the hierarchical scale, everything's very slow, very cumbersome, and very frustrating, really. So, you know, moving from there into a world of entrepreneurship and, you know, taking decision and far-reaching decision, it's really something that I really enjoy and appreciate very much. Because it's like totally opposite, you know, to the constraints that you usually face in the corporate world, you know, and just to, you know, to construct something yourself, you know, with your own hands and see it growing, it's really quite extraordinary. But not just that, you know, so for me, like creating art recognition was also a great chance, you know, like to combine my technical skills, which I have like accumulating over decades, basically. So, you know, like programming with application in physics, and then with some applications in finance, and then with some applications in art. So there is a sort of like red line, you know. And so, you know, the fact that I could combine something that I've learned to do like really good with my love for art, you know, and for beautiful things. I mean, it's really great, you know, it's like I found my mission. So it's really wonderful, you know, to be able to do this every day. And also, you know, the fact of establishing like a totally new, like genuinely innovative company into the art world, which is known to be like quite conservative and quite traditional, really. So, you know, like to bring the AI to those experts, which are like, I don't know, 70 plus or something, and to explain to them, you know, how neural network works and to show them that it actually makes sense. I mean, it's a very interesting exercise, but also very rewarding, you know, like when you realize that people start embracing this technology, you know, that they see the benefit of it, that they still use it like in their daily work, basically. So it's really quite amazing. So,
yeah. Well, you sound very motivated and happy to be in this new field, I take from what we hear. Ling, what about you? What is your definition of cultural and creative entrepreneurship? Because you created, now you're a bit outside of it. What's your definition?
Yes, thank you for the question. And it's been really inspiring to hear my fellows here introducing their stories. I guess what Brandon touched upon is actually about how to enhance or optimize people's experiences or their engagement with museums or cultural institutions. And that's exactly what I have been, be it with the Nice Society or now with this research project. Like you said, Muriel, your questions really what is the point? Like I stepped out of the institution to try to seek a position where I can step back and really look at these things maybe from a different perspective, to think more critically and deeply about these questions, what exactly it means to be engagement, what it means to be an engagement, what it means as creating situations for audiences, what it means to be an audience, and can there be like new relationships or new situations that can provoke people to, like there has been this shift in museums, in modern contemporary museums, to kind of shift the audience from a sheer spectator to a more kind of active participants to be in these situations. So I guess our job was really to look at, let's say, alternative ways, or to really question or think about what are maybe some problems of the existing patterns or models or ways of doing of like more traditional practices in the museum or in the creative industry, because it looks like a kind of economy in a way. Like traditionally, museum is these, you know, traditional cultural institution, and people go inside and just look, and the malls is another thing. In the past maybe 10 years, with the development of marketing economy in China, with a lot of boosting of new types of technologies and companies, people have more money and more actually enjoying public times in public spaces. A lot of exhibitions or art-related content actually happen in, let's say, more commercial spaces like shopping malls or parks or even fruit shops. I guess it opens up a lot of like possibilities for people to, I mean, for people in my industry, in my area as working for museums, to kind of reinvent museum as a contemporary space. And also using creative or culture-related contents to also reactivate those commercial spaces. So that was mainly the kind of like interwoven activities we've been trying to explore. And there are some younger generation teams, they want to move away from also more traditional like cooperative operations. They are borrowing concepts from, for example, social enterprise, social entrepreneur. When I was working for British Council, they had this department where they are much more aware of, let's say, the ethics behind commercial operations, and how people can combine more, let's say, not-for-profit driven initiatives with like maybe a space of survival in this market or commercial related area. So there are like these younger teams, maybe they are using the language of architecture, maybe they are using the language of design or performing arts to create these kind of new scenarios, situations, spaces in contemporary society. There are also teams, they are kind of multidisciplinary, so they work, maybe they are registered as kind of B Corp. So it's a type of corporate which is, you know, claiming with more let's say contribution or devotion in social driven welfare purposes. But they are also quite pioneering artists and architects. That is a really interesting trend in the younger generation of people. And we see more and more collaborations, cross-disciplinary, like I guess your platform is trying to reach kind of, so you see designers collaborating with, I don't know, biologists, and these kind of interesting dialogues happening more often among the younger generation of creative startups.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I want to ask Natalie if there are any questions.
We don't have any questions for now in the chat, but we propose you to ask them. So don't hesitate to interact with us.
Okay, so I will continue by asking questions. We've talked about what it's like to be a creative entrepreneur what your definition of being a creative entrepreneur is. Now, is it easier in some parts of the world? Maybe let's start with Ling. What is the situation in Asia, especially Shanghai or Shenzhen, which you know very well? We have the impression here in Europe that for creative entrepreneurship, Asia is the place to be. Is that sort of a caricature or a false image that we have?
Yeah, I guess we were living in a very promising land before the COVID and before the whole quarantine policies, and now Shanghai is under lockdown. I've been locked at home for 60 days, and it's still going on. I guess we are witnessing a lot of changes and the shifts, and it's maybe even historical changes. So I guess for the, like I said, so for the younger generation, my friends or my fellows whom I know well, we want to also kind of invigorate people who are suffering from these situations. I guess especially in a time like these. Where where museums are actually closed by force, people are not able to visit, and how we can invent new ways of interaction. I know there are people who are releasing like apps, helping people to compose poems with a mobile app, or to send flowers using like specific social interaction rules. And I guess a lot of fellows are still really contributing to, let's say, reacting or responding to this giant change that we are actually undergoing right now. When I was in Shenzhen, we often meet with like large corporates in China, technical firms like Tencent or Baidu. Every year they would have a budget for collaborating with arts or to develop specific projects promoting Chinese traditional heritage in arts and culture, or to support the younger generation of creative people. Like Design Society or some other projects I've been involved with, we've been always trying to to create a kind of language, maybe a new language that it speaks to people to look, for example, look at more traditional cultures in a more contemporary way, to introduce what is considered to be conventional into the contemporary life scenario. And all these thinkings are embedded in the specific design of the products or the development of the shops or the development of our exhibitions. So, for example, recently, in last year, there was this collaborated exhibition with the Victoria and Albert Museum. It's called Fashion from Nature. It actually is a very comprehensive historical exhibition introducing the history of fabric and cloth making. Spans over 400 years, and to create a kind of dialogue with the Chinese textile and cloth history. We formed with the China National Silk Museum, and there were a series of events and also merchandises developed along with that exhibition. So I guess cross-cultural dialogue is another way that we often use to introduce or to inspire people to see like one content from multiple perspectives.
But Thank you. Brendan, you talked a little bit about in your introduction about how in the United States it's very difficult for artists or for museums even to get funding from the government. So is that what makes a big cultural difference in the United States in terms of cultural entrepreneurship? Is that you're basically on your own?
Not necessarily. While I did point out that, the museums and cultural organizations in the United States receive less funding on a percentage basis than in Europe, for instance, I don't think that I would summarize that point around there being, a notion of lone wolf or being on your own as a cultural or creative entrepreneur. I think ultimately, when you look across the globe, about 3% of global GDP comes from creative or cultural, cultural jobs, cultural economy.
Cultural economy, yeah.
Exactly. But when you look at hubs, and I think the important thing here is to look at hubs rather than nation to nation or state to state. When you look at hubs, that becomes a really, illuminating point around the importance of what hub you're in, or at least historically, kind of before this remote COVID age. Like when you look at New York City, about 12% of, all of the United States of America, about 12% of all creative jobs are located in New York City. So that would kind of show you that being in a hub like New York City is incredibly conducive to creative output and also creative input and the right funding. Because I think in a lot of ways where these things flourish is where there's a certain level of liberalism or freedom, where creative ideas aren't met with oppression, whether it be political oppression, whether it be mindset oppression. You can have a great idea, and if you can't get the right funding or moral support, one or the other, you're going to feel like you're on your own and you're going to flee to the big city or the closest hub. And so there's a lot of these hubs around the United States where the creative economy is flourishing, whether it be in New York City or smaller places you might not have even heard of, like Providence, Rhode Island, or Northampton, Massachusetts, just kind of focusing on the Northeast, where, the percentage of individuals participating in the creative economy is incredibly high, because these are predominantly, open, they're inclusive communities.
And they're affluent.
That tends to also be part of it. I don't have any data that supports one way or the other, but when it comes to New York City, you're talking about some of the largest flow of capital, where that tends to be, if you are an artist, for instance, or you are a creative, or you are an entrepreneur, the probability of getting the funding or early support, and all of that is a snowball effect. All it takes is the first couple of checks of support, the first couple of words of encouragement, being in the right room at the right time. You're increasing your luck. You're increasing your probability of success being in those right hubs, where you could also be in another affluent nation or affluent city that just isn't supportive of entrepreneurship. We even have debates in Boston, which is one of the, thriving hubs of innovation and science and culture, where we lose entrepreneurs to San Francisco and to other places because there's a sense that there isn't enough support for the right idea and the right type of place. So I'm sure that's faced by countries all around the world where, why is it that artists gravitate to this place? Why is it that filmmakers gravitate to this place? Why is it that entrepreneurs gravitate to one city or the other? So I don't know if I would necessarily characterize it as being radically different from continent to continent, as it is from hub to hub. Because you could be a creative entrepreneur in Europe, but if you're in this particular city, I don't want to name names, but this particular city in this particular country, yeah, chances are culturally that community, whether it be a traditional mindset, that's been, throughout the decades or centuries, or politically or otherwise, just is not conducive to said industry. And so, yeah, I would kind of point it back to being in the right hub for your industry.
Which brings me exactly to the question that I wanted to ask Carina, because she's based in Switzerland, and Switzerland is considered extremely innovative all over the world. Basically, it's always ranked very well in terms of innovation. So do you feel that's the case in your field and what you've done? Has it helped being in Switzerland?
Absolutely, absolutely. And speaking of hubs, I think Zurich is actually a great place to be, both as a startup and as an art tech organization, because there is a lot of art here. There are a lot of art lovers, art collectors. But I mean, coming back to the innovation, so I mean, here in Switzerland, I believe there are like really many institutions, organizations that are supporting, startups in general, or ArtTech startups especially. And I think the ArtTech forum run by Natalie is a great example, really, because we also been there, and we could profit, from their network and from their events. So, but apart from that, there is, for example, the Swiss innovation agency called InnoSwiss, which I think is really wonderful, a great initiative, which has supported art recognition from day one, really. So starting with like a basic questions, like how to set up a company. I mean, no idea. And they are providing the coaches, the information, the expertise you need, to go to the commercial register, to do all the paperwork. So you can really start a company with a minimal effort, also financial work effort, just by using that help. And I think that's really great. And, as the company develops, you can get some assistance, while going through financing rounds, or finding investors. And again, I'm not just talking about art or ArtTech, I'm talking about startups in general. So with that in mind, I mean, I think that Switzerland, rightfully ranks like very high above in the innovation rankings. Apart from that, there are here in Zurich at least many hubs, there is something called Impact Hub, where you can sit together with other startups. We Art Recognition, we are actually working from a startup space operated by Generali. So they have like a startup, I don't know, division, let's call it, where we share a wonderful place, with other startups, and that really helps, because it's a lot of information spilling over, like, I don't know, how do you find a cheap app developer? How do you do the tax ruling? I mean, all of these questions, you can discuss with others who've been through the same process. So personally, I find it super helpful. Just to add that we at Art Recognition, I mean, we have also profited from the internationalization branch of InnoSwiss. So there is something that's called SwissNext, which has actually an office in Boston. And they helped us, for example, and also in New York City. So we went actually to New York, sponsored by SwissNext, and that was super helpful, because they helped us, make the first contact at Christie's, and talk to some art experts, and also brought us to the, Swiss consulate in New York. So, I mean, they did a lot of, networking for us and supported us and others, to basically open up new ways, in the US. And I think this is really great, the fact that in Switzerland it's possible, to profit from this kind of services, if I may call it so. And there are again also some European initiatives like Horizon, for example, where we've been also involved. So we have a partner university in the Netherlands, and we managed to win a research grant, and that also goes through InnoSwiss. So I mean, really, I think if I were to pinpoint a country on the world map, what I were to say is the best place to start a startup, that would certainly be Switzerland, because of these things and more.
Well, it's nice to hear. Natalie, do we have any questions? Still no questions?
Still your question.
Okay.
We have a very shy audience today, and I think that the discussion is so interesting that people are just listening.
Well, which is fine, I just wanted to touch on one thing briefly, and then we're going to slowly but surely come to the conclusion of this conversation. All three of you are in fields which require extensive knowledge in design, art, culture, and artificial intelligence as well. It seems a very complicated combination as an entrepreneur. Is that the case, Carina? To sort of find a talent that has all these qualities? All these qualities?
Yeah, so I mean, from a technical standpoint, I wouldn't say it's complicated. I mean, like I said, as a technical person, for me, it's really just a case of like feeding the AI with a different kind of data. But what I find actually difficult is to explain, you know, like because like I said before, like many of the players, you know, on the art market, they are still like very much focused, you know, like on the old methodologies or on the old techniques. So it really takes quite a bit of effort, you know, like to show them how the AI works, you know, to explain them the results, to create heat maps, you know, to explain the meaning of the probabilities. So I thought that part, you know, that bit was a bit complicated. But, you know, meanwhile, it got easier because people sort of like got used to it, you know, and there has been also like the whole digitalization trend, you know, blockchain, deep learning that were like speed up also by the pandemics, actually. So now I think we've got to a point, you know, where it becomes less challenging because it's more acceptance really on the market. So
Ling, what's your take on that? Is it complicated?
Yeah, I think it's I think like for the younger generation I'm more familiar with, they more tend to stay small. Not like maybe their further generation or like elder generations, they want to develop something big or international. Entrepreneurship, you know, aiming for very high profits, but they are more looking for a balance. The balance between among the like creation of social welfare, something more like community building, rather than like pure marketing endeavors, and to stay small and to keep digging more deeper. So instead of expanding, I think they are exploring the model of let's say cultivate an area and aiming for a longer period of time and sticking with relatively smaller but very stable, and like you said, maybe it's even becoming a kind of friendship or kind of affectionated relationship. So a lot of these studios or companies, even they may have offices probably both in Shanghai and Shenzhen, or it could be Shanghai and Berlin, or Shenzhen and Zurich. But usually they have around like 10 to 20 people, but they keep that their efforts really like targeted and focused on a specific area, and to try to develop like. So there is also this tendency of keeping a percentage of like self innovative projects. So it's not like you spend 100% of your energy just on, you know, getting more profits with the achievement you already made, but to always reserve maybe even around 30% of their time and efforts to really looking at some new directions, but still within that focus.
And I'm going to ask one last question to you, Brendan. If we look into the future, do you think that art, design, and the cultural world will be very different from today thanks to creative entrepreneurship? And where do you see the evolution going?
Absolutely. I think that the path that we are on shows the just sheer importance of what happens when creators, artists, designers, cultural producers come together and synergize. We've seen this over the last couple of years. We've seen this over the last couple of decades. And I think that we're at this really, really interesting and curious moment in time where just everything is facing some form of disruption. And the innovators are always going to be there to push forward, the paradigm and to push forward new ways of thinking whenever an opportunity presents itself, or even when an opportunity doesn't present itself. And I think that all of this is because, it's in the culture, but also there's never been an easier time in history to start a business. There's never been more support available. It's never been easier than it is today to build technology, to combine, different perspectives, and we've never been more connected than we are today. So I think all of those are key ingredients in driving forward, what the future looks like. And I think that it is creative entrepreneurs and cultural entrepreneurs that have a unique opportunity to reimagine, what the world looks like. So I'm really excited to see, what entrepreneurs like the group that are on this panel today, as well as entrepreneurs that have been supported and recognized by the ArtTech Foundation, are able to, to put together, because I think it's going to be magnificent to see what's created, and that's a world that I want to live in.
Well, I think that's a very optimistic note on which we will conclude. I don't think there's any more we can say after that. Thank you, Brendan. Thank you, Ling. I hope soon that you will be out of confinement and back out in the world. Thank you, Carina from Zurich, for your participation and the very thought-provoking discussion from all three of you. Thank you. And thanks to those following us. We will see you next time on June 7th for our next ArtTech Conversation. You will find all the information on our website. Hope you join us then. And until next time, take care. Thank you.
Thank you
Thanks,
very
everyone.
much. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Bye.